Welcome to No Idea Yet. Are you too scared to ask or too lazy to Google? Well, you've come to the right place. With me today we have Jonathan.
Hello.
And Freddie.
Hello.
And I'm your host for this week, Alistair. So, we're going to talk about, if you listened to our last episode, I'd recommend listening to that before this one, which was on hobbies and what can be counted as a hobby and all of that good stuff. And this episode is going to be on slightly more about what we spend our time doing and delving into the slightly more interesting world, perhaps, of vices and whether or not they can ever be considered useful or good. We might go a little bit philosophical, do you need the yin and the yang, the good and the bad? And we're going to talk a little about music as well this episode. So to open it up, let's go from the top. Vices, how would you define a vice? Put over to you first, Freddie.
I don't think it has to be attached to the table, but generally it's something on a table that holds your wood or metal material in place as you cut it.
Exactly. Let's go deeper into this.
Oh, so
How does music fit into a vice? Is music tangible?
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I've been awaiting this for the last 2 weeks because I'm sure I've given you guys some jip for you. Anyway, Johnny, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think drums are difficult to put into vices, but guitars easy.
Okay, I've got a quick question then, because I'm not sure. Is a vice definitely bad?
This is kind of what I wanted to go into today. So obviously, a vice, I think, we'll obviously researchers go away and see how our opinions change. So we're trying to go into this relatively sort of wet behind the ears, as it were. My take on it was that very much they are bad things. They are things that are in your life that are perceived as negative and therefore a part of your life. And then obviously, if you've got too many, it may very well have a hugely negative impact on your life. But then there are things in your life that some people might consider a vice that actually for you potentially works better, or I don't know. This is free to justify your demons, or just figure out some or whatever you want to do. But I think it's I think go on.
I was gonna say, I think a good thing for this is like you generally use a word, or you know how to use a word, you know kind of what it is, but then obviously you need to ask dictionary definition, what is it? I think this is a good one for me because watching a show recently, rewatching Dexter, and the phrase of like, oh, everyone's got their vices, is it was said recently, and it makes you think. For me, it just kind of, I feel, I guess it's more of a habit that you may have, which isn't hugely detrimental, but may be as well something which is a huge detrimental, like vice. I guess the reason why is because it's gripping you, or something which is like a habit which grips you, and you can't necessarily get out of it. Smoking, I think, is one like classic vice someone has, or drinking, or those like classic ones.
Yeah, I think smoking, drinking, gambling, all those sort of things that are perceived as very much have a grip on your life that you can't expel.
I guess because I guess, would you say that a vice more or less refers to addiction, but surely there's other things that are a vice that aren't necessarily addiction?
I was feeling like it was going towards, like, is in the same spectrum where it's kind of like a soft addiction, like it's something like you can go without, but it's something you enjoy and it has a negative effect.
Guilty pleasure, I think, would be the kind of
that's on the spectrum,
the vice light, as it were. If you've got things are guilty pleasures, and I think that there is definitely a place in everyone's life for those. I think that's that can be a very good thing. But and like I said, so we'll go into the slightly deeper bit, I think, of so in terms of a vice, if we obviously are in agreement they're mostly perceived as bad, can they be necessary? Can they have positives? Can they if this is not an AA meeting, if you're looking into this, very much not. But we could it's
I have a friend, and he says he's met people who are like truly addicts. Like I think he knew somebody who's a meth addict, and said like it's funny because you always think of a thing with addiction that people actively wanted to do it because you have the recreational world of drug taking, but then there's also the addiction side. And for him, it's like he didn't end up going to his brother's funeral because he was ashamed of himself. It wasn't necessarily because he wasn't invited, but because he hated what he did. And it was a case that he didn't want to do it anymore. And he hated every time he did it, but he just couldn't stop himself. But one thing my friend said is like, you never truly get rid of an addiction. You just change it to something else. So like sometimes like if you don't smoke,
you've got that energy and you just have to channel it somewhere else.
So you never lose the addiction. You just change what you're addicted to and just something more. So you could say a vice being like, sometimes it's a little vice you have, it keeps at bay something worse, if you know what I mean. Like, I do that so I don't do this.
Oh man, this really plays into the like to be is to suffer, or I'm not sure exactly how it works with the Buddhism, but like to be alive is to live is to suffer, something like that. And that you're just constantly moving between vices, right?
Definitely, some people are more prone to them than others. I would have thought. Like obviously, people who've got more addictive personalities and things. But I think one of the key things I would obviously go back to, again, it's pretty obvious, pretty over said, but is there the balance side of it? You do need a bit of release, a bit of cathartic release sometimes. If that is having a few drinks or doing something that can be good. I don't think I think when it starts really gripping your life and taking over in a negative way, that's what
Well, I feel a good thing would be, are vices only technically ever subjective, or can you get objective vices? Because you're saying like they can be cathartic. Sometimes, like, could you say going to sleep is a vice? Like living from vice to vice is like sleeping, eating. Because if you don't do them, you need to do them, and it's like that's something which controls you. And you don't assume them as a bad vice, but technically it's something you can't get out of. You kind of. So I guess it would depend on the definition of a vice, and then.
Oh my god! You're saying this word so much that it's losing meaning in my head. I'm gonna ask Alistair. Can you use vice in a sentence that's not just I have a vice, but can you use like going, I don't know, reading noir comics, that's my vice. Does that make sense? Can you just double check for me?
I think my current perception of it is that it's something that has a grip on your life and is in a negative way, or that people would perceive to be negative. So they say, oh, he likes drinking a little bit too much and it's become a vice in his life. That would be a way I think you could say it's a negative rather than a hobby.
Okay, because feeling it, I don't know why, just hear me out. For some reason, I feel like a vice is not, even though it's perceived as negative, it's not something that you talk about as if you're going to give it up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I was touching this. Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the point I'm making about balance and how they can fit into your life. And I do believe that you can live a very good life and do a lot of good things, but have something that is your cathartic release, like murdering people, as Johnny was saying with Dexter. Whatever it is. No, we're not condoning murder for the listeners out there, for the people rushing.
No idea yet. Would like to confirm that it does not condone violence against people, animals, or objects.
Just never get angry. Yes. But I think it's a good. I like your point of it's assuming that when you talk about it, you're assuming you're not going to get rid of it, or at least it's somebody's part of their like habit or personality, isn't it? Or it's their vice.
Definitely. I've already been part of it. Yeah.
Like to put it back, it's like a hobby, isn't it? But a bad one. It's like it's regular.
Where the hell else to get the idea for this episode?
It's an activity that you regularly do. You're not paid for it. You're not a professional at it. Come on.
Oh, you're good at this. Okay, so is anyone here willing to admit on not live television, nor is television, what their vice is?
So I'll tell you, I'm happy to go first because it was something that I was thinking about sort of recently. I think you both know. I keep track of how many beers I've had since the beginning of 2019. I've got a list of every beer I've had since the beginning of 2019. Not because I thought I had a problem with drinking. Obviously, when I was in university then anyway.
So I had a problem with drinking, so.
So I was at university, it was a fun problem, yeah. No, I was just generally curious how much we drink. But I think I've told you this before as well, Freddie, that my dad, when I was like 17, he was like, he just sort of sat me. He was like, just so you know, you've got quite serious alcoholics on both sides of your family. Not like having a drink. Just be aware of that and go forward. So I think it's quite a mature way to bring something like that with your kids. Anyway, yeah. So drinking, I can safely say I enjoy a drink, and therefore I think it's not something I plan on quitting anytime soon. But it's equally something that I would definitely say I have control over. Like I don't, I could go a long time without drinking. But yeah,
anytime I can quit anytime. What are you talking about? I can quit any.
I was gonna say is there any way to say that when you do something semi-regularly to try convince somebody that you're not? He's like, no, I can stop anytime I want. It's like, yeah, what you say that now?
I
No,
completely
there's no way you can't.
where people listen to this would go with this. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but it's so hard to explain. If somebody gets you in the corner, like, yeah, but really, yeah, could you though? It's like, no, honest, I can. It's like, now I just sound like a crazy person.
No, I mean, also, if you obsessively tell them exactly how long it's been since your last one, even it doesn't matter how long it is. It doesn't matter how long. It could be 10 years. You're like, it's been 10 years, 26 hours, and 4 minutes since my last drink.
I don't know.
Oh, God, the chip.
Oh, I've got to ask, what's the number? You can't say there's a number, and then.
Well, how many beers I've had since the beginning of 2019? It was quite dramatically less this year. Actually, nearly the end of the year. It's 7:31 tomorrow, so I can actually do I haven't done the full calculations for this year.
Excited.
Last year was a few, though, I must confess. It was over £2,000 worth, which sounds pretty bad, I don't know when you say that. 2019, it was 628 beers.
Wow, that's mad.
Right, 2 a day.
But
2 a day if you average out like that, which sounds like quite a lot actually when you say like that. So yeah.
But I think alcoholism is such a good one for vices because, like, working in pubs and seeing regulars, you realise the term regular just means alcoholic, really. Like, it's a nice way of saying they are a residential alcoholic, which is completely okay. Because, like, somebody would come in, and they would come in like nearly every day, say they're retired or something, and they come in for the social. So there's a guy and his wife that came in, she would have a half, he would have a pint, they'd chat with the mates, be drinking it, then they'd order another one. So that's another half, another pint, and then maybe dependent, he would have another half, she wouldn't have one, then they would go home. And you could say, like, they go home for lunch or something. Or when they're at lunch, some people would like to have a beer with their lunch or something like that, you know, or possibly not. And then they come back to the pub, see their friends again in the evening or something, maybe have 2 beers, go back home, then you may have a beer when you're at home. And like the whole time, you're not drinking to get drunk, you're just socially drinking. But there's no way you say that you can't say they're not an alcoholic, because they're drinking like in excess of a lot of units. It's like my mum said, her dad, she never saw him drunk, yet he died of liver failure because he used to drink whiskey every night. It's just simple as that. And just he hammered his liver, and not from getting drunk, but just from having a habit.
But getting drunk is just like the actual act of being drunk is like enough is affecting you in the brain that you feel it in kind of consciously, right? You have a conscious feeling of it. Whereas, I mean, alcohol, they've shown like even 1 beer already affects your reaction times.
Massively.
Even the smallest amount of alcohol has an effect on your body. It is, cough, cough, a toxin. It's a poison. So, like, I mean, it does, and you just don't realize it. So yeah, you forget that someone having just a beer every day, even if they're not feeling the effects mentally, it's attacking their body.
For sure. I think, yeah, to sort of follow on from that, I think one of the things that I really got very interested when I was listening to Passenger. Okay, I don't know if you guys like Passenger. This segue into the music bit a little bit, but so Passenger has a song called Community Centre, which if you haven't heard, I would definitely, that's part of your homework for this week. But yeah, it's called Passenger Community Centre. It's on Spotify or whatever, however you listen to music. And yeah, it's basically, if once you listen to that, the rest of his songs then make a lot more, all of his references to drinking and make a lot more sense. Anyway, I read after that. I looked up what's the definition of an alcoholic, and again we can talk about this next week as well if you want. But or in the second half, sorry. I think it was the 3 things that were included. Just the amount you drink each week, it wasn't that high, and then if you drink by yourself, and if you lie about your drinking, and if you do any 2 of those 3 things, then you're an alcoholic. Apparently, I think that was the definition. But yeah, like I said, as a vice, I think it's definitely not a great one, and it can definitely destroy lives in a really big way. But yeah, no. Would anyone else like to share any vices, or we can go on to the music part?
Reddit, 100%. What you'll find.
I'm not quitting. I love it.
As you, especially living with somebody else who you spend a lot of time with. So, especially saying if you live with a partner, this is definitely not to be like, oh well, the wife. There's 3 rings in a marriage: the engagement ring, the wedding ring, and the supper ring. Thank you, American Dad, for that.
That's awful.
Do you like that boomer humor kind of thing? But do you like, obviously when you're on your own, you can't necessarily check yourself for the habits that you have, or a vice, for instance. You may not even know you've got a vice because you're doing it on your own. But for obviously living with somebody, it's like you're on Reddit again. You're on Reddit again. You're like, yeah, you're right. I'm on it a lot because it's so accessible. And I guess it's phones generally are like a vice, aren't they? But definitely living with someone, you can be so much more aware of yourself because as you are of each other, because you're suddenly affecting somebody else, not just yourself. So yeah, Reddit's definitely a vice of mine, which I don't mean to have, but definitely do.
You touched on like two things I was interested in, like, I mean, just of checking. So what Alistair's just mentioned about him counting his beers, there is no way you'd have a conscious knowledge of how much you've been drinking without writing, like putting the actual effort in to write down each time. And even then, you look at the results and you're like, that's not true. Like, you can feel it, can't you? You look at it, you're like, nah. And then it's when you have someone next to you actually saying, like, mentioning your tics or habits that you don't even consciously sense. Yeah, that's something that definitely probably ties into a vice, but maybe a vice starts out as something you don't even realize. Like, it becomes a vice later on, but you've already started something. But that's very interesting.
The frog in the gradually heating water, right? Yeah, never notice.
Yeah, and then it dies.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good thing of noticing. I think so much you're the hero in your own story kind of thing, and kind of the idea that you have of yourself. I think living with somebody, or I think even uni and stuff like that, you pick up on yourself so much more because stuff's not in your head anymore, if you know what I mean. And it's kind of like this idea of how you're thinking is who you think you are, but then the actions that you do are sometimes completely different. You don't mean to. But yeah, so I think definitely from living with people, so starting from uni, you realise the interactions you have with other people are sometimes different than in your head. Sorry, again, particularly philosophical.
No, that was actually kind of my hope with this, because I wanted to go a bit sort of deeper into the philosophy.
Yeah, vices are definitely noticed more with other people around rather than on your own.
Oh man, I'm trying to think what vice. I mean, I definitely have alcohol as a vice. I definitely have Reddit as a vice. What's the thing is, I would have said video games.
I wonder why we're such good friends, the three of us.
Hey guys, want to take a drink and watch stupid stuff on the internet? Yeah.
That's sweet.
Like, the same thing we do every night, Biggie.
Oh man, nothing. Like, I would have said like video games, but actually, just because I haven't got access to video games, it's just stopped. During quarantine, when I was in Spain, I was playing an excess. I mean, I can't remember how many hundreds of hours I sunk into Apex Legends, but it was a lot. And then it just stopped because I didn't have access to it and I was somewhere else. So it just stopped, and I didn't have any pangs, like sad pangs. But I would have said vices. My vice was that I couldn't stop playing video games during quarantine. I played every night for hours and hours and hours, sometimes in the mornings because I just had nothing else to do when I wasn't planning my lessons. And yet it just stopped without having access to it. So that makes me wonder if it's a vice, right? Still.
Could you say that's the difference between, like, something which is a hobby because you want it to be, and a hobby is because there's circumstantial, isn't it? Like circumstantial friends you have, and you realize that I'm only friends with you because we work together. It's not because I wouldn't necessarily, like, not keeping friends outside of work because I'll see you every day, and it's kind of like it never becomes more necessarily.
So can you have circumstantial vices then? Yeah.
Well, like the gaming, definitely. Yeah, if you take video games away from me, it's
agree.
Fair enough. Because the thing is, now I'm in this mixed up part of my life where I haven't got, I mean, at time of recording, we're currently in the UK with its different tiering systems of COVID, and I can and can't see people depending on the movement of the sun. I mean, they say it's
currently it is the 30th of December today, so basically the end of the year. So yeah, time of recording.
In case you didn't get that when Alistair said, "Oh, it's nearly the end of the year,"
just in case you didn't have a calendar handy.
Yeah. So I'm kind of, because I haven't got a good routine and I haven't got any sort of stability currently in my life, because I'm living in different places at different times and I'm moving around. I mean, this isn't an exaggeration. I'm literally moving country next week. I haven't got vices right now in the same kind of way that I would normally. Like, I haven't got having that chocolate bar every
a cool thing as well for, like, I don't want to say back, there's a Rat Palace study which was done, but I think it's been like kind of argued against, of think for Vietnam was like a huge case study, effectively, of people went out to Vietnam from America and they took loads of heroin when they were out there because there was loads of heroin around. You're in a horrible wartime situation. You just want to get like escape kind of thing. And then when they came back, there wasn't actually a huge amount of heroin drug addicts that came back. They just kind of came back and they stopped. And it's that thing of, I guess that's something who could, I feel that's a huge section to look into, but it could be something of like, our vices circumstantial as well. You know, if you take away,
yeah, 100%. Rehab wouldn't work, would it? If that wasn't the case to a degree. Like I say, I mean, I think there's a big thing about people if they give up drinking. Drinking is also a big one because it's such a social thing. But you invariably quite often have to get a whole new friend circle, or definitely get friends that aren't, like you say, if you're a regular in a pub or something. It's it's definitely like a routine to link device. It's interesting.
Now you're making me think that actually maybe it's a solid link. Like if, let's say, alcohol was only accessible from pubs. Let's say, for example, in Australia, they actually have a very strange system where, well, not strange, I guess, to them, you have liquor stores and only those stores sell alcohol. You can't get it in the supermarket. So if something like COVID happens, all bars close, you cannot access alcohol. Like, you just stop. Most people stop. Obviously, there are some alcoholics who'd have a terrible time, but I guess we'd all just stop, right? The vice would stop for a bit.
Yes, I think that would stop the people where maybe it's the addictive personality side, because some people would be like, no, it's a physical addiction where they're not able to. So I think I wouldn't necessarily blanket it to say that all people would stop, but you'd have to, wouldn't you? You just have to go through withdrawal and then have to stop if you can't make it yourself or source it. There's no way to. Would you then swap the alcoholism for someone else? Could you? What happens if you just stop it?
Yeah. I think when a vice gets beyond vice and it's full blown addiction, I think it's no longer vice, and then it's different. I think, but no, I'm not contradicting your point. Just you're making me think of the whole spectrum of, habits, hobbies, vices, obsessions, addictions.
To look up vice versus addiction.
Touch on this music thing. So, what got me thinking about this was obviously in terms of our hobbies and everything, what we're talking about and how we spend time. And it's sort of a bit of a lighter note to end the episode, or to end this half of the episode. Sorry. Basically, I was looking at music, sort of relationship to it, and obviously the Spotify Wrapped thing was quite recently. That was why everyone was talking about their, assuming you both use Spotify, would have thought. No matter who doesn't really, so it's, obviously it gives you your full stats for the whole year. The first thing I was going to ask you guys, which I've always found quite an interesting thing to ask people when we talk about music, is how would you compare, how high would you rank lyrics as the importance in music when you're listening to it, or how much do you think rhythm and things and the beat and all the rest of that is
an anecdote for like, I don't think I ever held lyrics to much importance, especially in high school, because I remember it was a Christian metal band I used to listen to, and I tried telling somebody, I should definitely listen to this band, they're well good, they're very cool. And then as soon as I told them it was a Christian band, they were like, I'm not going to listen to it. And I was like, well, just don't listen to the lyrics, it's just really good music. And it was like, whereas for them, it was like, no, like if the lyrics like that, I'm just not going to listen to it. And obviously they didn't like the idea of being Bible bashed, which I didn't even intend to do, to be honest. But for me, lyrics are secondary. However, like Plan B, Strickland's Defamation, can't remember his album, that with the lyrics makes it such a good album, because he tells a story of each song is a story in this guy, like a little moment in this guy's life, and it's just so good with the lyrics, and they make it so much better than music. But again, for me personally, I feel a lot of the time lyrics are secondary to music, but they can enhance them. We look at nowadays, there's people who say like Watermelon Sugar, I really like Harry Styles, but he mainly just says watermelon sugar, strawberries, summer feeling. That's about it.
I watched a great video on this. I can't remember the guy's name, but I watched a lot of his videos. He's a jazz musician, and he breaks down songs and says if they're musically good or bad in his opinion, right? And he says he recognizes it's subjective and blah blah blah. And the Watermelon Sugar one, he was like, "What are they doing? What are they doing? I don't understand. It's famous. It's good. I mean, it's got a summer hit, but let's just go down this chord progression. It's not jazzy. What are they doing?" And it's just like, because it goes, Watermelon Sugar, ha, Watermelon Sugar, ha, Watermelon Sugar, ha. It's just like, he's like, why would you go there? why not go to C major? Instead, they go to D? Why? It's not actually those, but I can't remember right now. And he breaks it down, and it's really interesting to see him break down different artists. He even says that he really likes Harry Styles' other pieces, but he thinks that someone just made a mistake in this. It's very strange. But then when I listen to Watermelon Sugar, for example, I jam with it. I think it's fun. But
I like it.
It's interesting, like hearing an expert break down the music. And I would highly recommend any of you guys, all our listeners, to look for songs broken down by jazz musicians just for a bit. You'd have to watch the whole thing, but it's cool. I know I just didn't answer your question.
No, like I said, it's just a sort of lighter note to end the episode on, to end up that half anyway.
Go on, do the opening. Do the opening.
Well, it's not an opening.
It's no opening, mate. It's midway through.
Yeah, second half opening.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second half of our episode 2 of No Idea Yet. With me today, we have Jonathan.
Hello.
And Freddie.
Hello.
So, we were talking about vices. Now, I thought I'll send us off because we were talking about this quite a lot. I'm actually going to give you the definition of a vice, okay? So strap yourselves in, boys. Here we go. Vice is a practice, behavior, or habit generally considered immoral, sinful, criminal, rude, taboo, depraved, or degrading in the associated society. In more minor usage, vice can refer to a fault, a negative character trait, a defect, an infirmity, or a bad or unhealthy habit. Vices are usually associated with transgression or in a person's character or temperament rather than their morality. Synonyms for vice include fault, sin, depravity, iniquity, wickedness, and corruption. So quite a lot darker than we were kind of going for, I feel like. What do you think from that?
I think you just ruined everything I researched.
Well, also the first paragraph of Wikipedia.
Yeah, exactly.
I did actually put on the thing of, but oh man, vice is only bad. I somehow felt like we thought it wasn't going to be a little. It's like, oh, it's just like mild, but it's like no.
Yeah, we
look it up,
like,
it's only bad.
Yeah, that's
And it goes from like mediocre bad to really like abhorrent bad. You know,
it's like the weird part where it's going down the immoral route. Like, I mean, immoral is obviously subjective to like your culture, but it's just kind of like we find it's immoral to bed underage people, and so then is that a vice if you can't help yourself?
Way off what we were thinking.
oh man,
like morals.
Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, so there you go. That was probably the biggest thing. Was way worse than we were going at. We were sort of, it's got a bit of a grip on your life, and you know maybe don't want to get rid of it. But yeah. So then I think that might be colloquially how it's used as a term and everything. So
this is what I got for the definition of a moral fault or weakness in someone's character, or a bad habit, a weakness in someone's character, but not usually as a serious fault. So kind of like minor, definitely a fault in someone's character. Multiple definitions going from mild to abhorrent. I assume we're talking about the prior. So I assume one of the previous one we were talking about like the minor version, not like the drugs and vice, which is
100%. Yeah, I think so. I think that.
Also,
yeah, that
one thing I found out is that vice is the opposite of virtue. So and then the 7 deadly sins are also known as capital vices. So those being like, I thought that was cool. I've written them all down, but I'm going to read them out because there's like 14 things to read out. So I thought I'll come for you.
Well, you see,
well,
I was.
I'm not going for it.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, please carry on, Freddie.
I went down the route of asking friends what their vices were or what they thought a vice was. Because, I mean, that's just a lot easier if you just export any effort you have to do to other people. So I got a lot of things like online betting and drinking and basically the same kind of things that we said. And then one friend of mine said that they thought vices were coping mechanisms. That a vice comes from, basically kind of a coping mechanism with life or stress or anxiety. And so then perhaps it ties in with something that is bad, but you don't want to quit.
That's really good. I like that a lot, yeah. Yeah, I think that ties into the balance thing we were talking about and all of that, which is you can't appreciate all the things, or if you like I say, well, coping mechanisms, it's definitely more of you need that. So yeah, I like that.
One thing I found is the word derives from the Latin vitium, meaning failing or defect. And when I looked at it, it said from the Old English to New, the most common thing we could think to refer it to is vicious, so full of vice. which is then more of a different thing to think about as well.
Yeah, that's very good. I mean, language as a tool that we use in society changes all the time, and that's the thing. When someone says a word and you totally use it in that sense, and then your grandma's like, that doesn't make any sense, and you're like, yeah, it does, grandma.
It's sick and I'm not ill, thank you very much. Or
yeah, exactly.
Illest and I'm still not ill. Still good.
Wicked, I'm still not a witch.
But it could be a vice.
Could be a vice being a witch.
Could
Like
nearly be
children.
one of the 7 deadly sins. Nearly, not quite.
You know it.
So yeah, I think the one thing that I can add to that a little bit, which is something that a friend of mine told me quite a long time ago, his sort of motto, as it were, for this, which I think ties in quite nicely. He say everything in moderation, including moderation. So basically, don't go too overboard or anything, but every now and again, just have a bit of a blowout. Occasionally moderate your moderation, I think was his.
Don't be too moderate.
Don't be dull.
Basically, yeah. Spice of life, all that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So,
make sure you're not crazy, but don't be dull.
Don't be, don't be
too mild-mannered.
Exactly.
One thing, because I know we chatted about addiction, and I thought I'll look up the two and see if we can find the difference. And it's because I think it's hard to differentiate between the two realistically. But I guess if you look into the definitions, it's that an addiction is a psychological and physical issue, whereas a vice is usually more like maybe not in the same. I feel like an addiction can be a vice, but I feel addiction is like a harsher, more bigger word than vice, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And I also learned about the Vietnam War and addiction. And
because they came back and they weren't addicted anymore.
So it turns out. So I looked it up. So in the Vietnam, 51% of soldiers smoked weed, 28% heroin or cocaine, 15% were heroin addicts, 31% tried psychedelics, 255 million stimulant tablets were consumed between 66 and 69 by army forces. It was mad. They took so many drugs out there. It hammered loads. Then they came back, and Nixon, rather than being like, let's put money into all these addicts we're getting from the war, he just got loads of celebs to say drugs are bad and just did that instead. It was this thing of the Veterans Administration Hospital only handled 3 out of 12,000 addicted troops that were given referrals upon coming home, which is just mad. And when
Tom, Jack, and Harry.
It's just, and anyone who's addicted to heroin, they made him dry out in Vietnam before sending him back home. But then it was actually they did a 8 to 12 month follow-up. Only 7% showed addiction, and it was a higher likelihood if they were already addicted before going to Vietnam. They came back, and it is. And then looking at studies, although they had a terrible time there and no one really helped them, it was a case of it's the environment which changes your habits and vices. So, if you're going back home, it's like with rehab clinics. Go to rehab, you get clean, you're great. You come out, you're just going back to the same people, the same spots. Smoking, you go inside a building, and outside the smoking area, you're like, oh, actually, maybe I'll just do that. But you get rid of that little
opportunity.
Thing. Yeah, and then it decreases that habit. And yes, environment.
If you or the listeners, I feel like you guys might know this, the Rat's Paradise experiment.
Apparently that's been disproved somehow. I don't know how, but I remember Kurzgesagt.
We talked about that in the first half of of this episode.
Yeah. Yeah, we did, didn't we? I thought the Kurzgesagt video was
the German one. Yes,
was for it. I thought they said it worked.
No, they did, but they had a follow-up one on it. So they had the addiction video, which was really good, and I definitely said that to a lot of people. And then they've had a video recently saying, actually, we're going to change part of it because a new study has come out or it's been disproven or something like that. So that would need a follow-up to make sure. I can't remember if it was the Rat Palace or more just about addiction. They had things which they took back from the previous video.
Well, I guess we're going to have to pause this, watch it, and then read.
We'll be right back.
Welcome back in 6 weeks' time when we remember to do this. Yeah. So, 7 Deadly Sins. It's funny that you touched on that, Johnny, because I also was probably on the first page of Wikipedia. One thing that I did notice as well is that our thing about vices gripping you, I couldn't really see that anywhere. I think that's just, I'm going to totally claim that as us coming up with it. So,
Smart.
And then, yeah, I think the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. Any that particularly kind of stand out to you as being worthy of 2 minutes of discussion?
If you've watched the film Seven, I mean, that's
fantastic.
Watched that recently, and it's just, some of them are like, one guy having to cut a pound of his own flesh out for greed, is it? As is kind of the way the scales justice. And then that seems relatively light in compared to, say, tying someone up for a year and then just drip feeding them nutrients and they just go slowly mad and starve to death. But then don't actually die, but they're just insane. I mean, that's intense.
Also, great rule for life: always, if you're going to go do a house viewing, stay for long enough if it's near a train track. I think that's that's what I learned from the film.
Huge. It's like 5 minutes in, 5 minutes out, and it's like there's trains everywhere. On my searches as well, it was that the virtues to the vices were, I thought they'd be like a really either or, but say charity and sloth, I feel those aren't the polar opposites, and clearly the virtues.
Really, you could be a very busy person who doesn't give anything to charity.
Yeah. I quite like, pride is always a good one, because I think pride's something we definitely consider you should be proud of something or what you do, or what have you done? Kind of, you were saying previously what keeps you busy or whatever in hobbies, and I think pride is one which is kind of like, actually, I think a lot of people confuse that with something you should be proud of yourself, but actually it's still like, it's ego, isn't it? I think it's
okay. Can I give you an interesting thought experiment I just thought of as I googled 7 deadly sins?
You can.
Okay, I'm going to read out the 7 deadly sins one by one, and you name an advert or like an advert that you can imagine that actually says that this sin is good.
Yeah,
because I've just realised all of them I could picture as adverts on TV.
Oh, so I mean,
some of them are going to be very easy. It's going to be like 90% of adverts. But sorry, Johnny, go on.
I think it's no, it's not sloth. Greed, maybe. The Samsung Jet advert for the phone. I had it in high school. Samsung Jet advert was just so like, oh yeah, I still have it saved in my YouTube videos for being such a good advert. And it's like, don't wait for now. Do it don't wait for tomorrow because so people finish last, whatever. It's just a great advert.
You could have just waited for me to get to that one.
No, I didn't know which one it was. I was just too excited. I was so excited. It's just the best advert ever. And it's so bad because it's like, no, this is like a deadly sin.
Hey guys, let's play a game of football. And I've scored a goal, guys. I've scored a goal. We haven't started
yet.
Okay, 3, 2, I've already gone.
I was going to say, okay, so let's try. Lust. What kind of adverts advertise lust?
And Summers.
Right. And Summers.
Every perfume, yeah, you're right.
Every car advert ever.
Sex sells, dudes. Sex sells.
There's a study that found sex only sells sex. So people found that when they watched, because there was like I think it was Hardee's or something, they had this really sexy advert for a burger, for fast food place, and they found all people wanted to do after that was just sex related things. It was like they didn't want to eat a burger, just sex sells sex. So it's kind of like when you put sex in an advert, it just makes people want to do something related to that and not relate to the burger or the product.
So they all go out and pay for sex, or they just do that?
just go to the bathroom or something for 2 minutes.
Burgers. Yeah. Sex with burgers and just sex on bacon. Okay, gluttony. Burgers. Greed. Still burgers.
Yeah. Greed and gluttony. Greed, absolutely.
Any of those investment apps?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a shout.
Sloth.
Sloth is literally everything that makes your life easier all the time. Which is
any
Alexa,
match adverts.
Match adverts. So DFS.
They're pretty. DFS is pretty intense though. I feel that's not very sloth-like. It's kind of like, oh geez, you need to go now. Bye.
Wrath.
Gambling.
Oh yeah.
I tell what surprises me that most of it, you know how much stuff's illegal on TV now, like advertising cigarettes, obviously for like the longest time, but beer, I don't think you can advertise in the UK anymore. Gambling adverts are absolutely everywhere. In a lockdown, you're like, surely that's gonna, cause a pretty major problem in lockdown. Nothing
like Betfred and stuff have now changed their adverts to being like, be responsible gambling, but still gamble, please.
Yeah, they're like, gamble. Hey, when the fun stops, stop. But it's like,
it's like
drink never stops.
It's like drink responsibly, but make sure it's our product.
Yeah.
Okay, envy.
Literally any consumer advert.
I was thinking like Wix.
Wix.
Other people have not Wix, WICKS.
Oh, the kitchen one.
Everyone has better houses than you.
Yeah. Yeah, fully.
Comparison being the thief of joy. I think that comes up in most of that sort of stuff, really. But
Yeah, and then
compare.
final one, pride.
Go compare, mate. Every time for pride. Yeah.
Go compare. I feel like it's like a what's it called? That cycle thing.
Pentathlon.
No, Pethlon. It's that cycle bike that's like, come on.
Yeah. What's the
What is it? It's like a cult, apparently. It's really good. But
yeah, it's really,
a bit
really
culty.
expensive.
Yeah.
It's like 40 quid a month for the subscription, like
Then
over
you buy a
£2,000 for the bike. Peloton.
Peloton.
Let's go, Peloton.
That's pride, because that makes you feel like, yeah, be the person you're going to be, kind of thing. You know, be proud of yourself. Be somebody
All
you
those
want to be
fitness
proud
ones,
of. Yeah.
Well,
that's good.
Johnny, well done on winning that, obviously, by saying your advert first. With Samsung.
Yeah, you're going to go on it.
I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to do it right now. And you'll watch it later. And you'll be like, okay, that's okay. It may be by the phone either way, and it's got a cool case.
All right, so just quickly, the last quick thing to finish off, we were talking about music a little bit. So actually, does anyone else have any final thoughts on any of the Vice stuff?
Well, tied together what you said with the music, you gave us some homework was to listen to a song. And one of the lyrics that stood out to me, that ties the two together, was they say I've got a problem, but I don't know that I've got one, because you never know you've got one until someone comes along and spots one.
There you go.
But then, like, it kind of, I feel like it was two ways. Like, one way is someone, because you don't recognize addiction sometimes before you have it, right? Someone's like, "Oh, you have a lot of coffee, mate." It's like, "Oh no, just one in the morning and in the afternoon, in the evening, it's fine." But the other is when other people look for faults in you to make themselves feel better.
You only mentioned exactly this basically with last week, with his Reddit stuff, and his wife being like, "You spend a lot of time on Reddit, dude."
Chill with the Reddit. And every time I'm like, "Damn it, you're totally right. I still want to do it."
That's good stuff. No, I'm glad. Fred, it's funny you said that. Is literally the line of the song that made me think about it when we were talking about it last week, which is why I said.
I thought you listened to the song and then you were like, "I have a great idea for an episode today." It was like,
I want to base an entire podcast around this.
It's song. Vices and a little bit of music, because that's where I heard the song from.
Just really like Passenger. Just going to plug Passenger,
One thing, just to say similar to that, is just for a good album, and Freddie's heard this a million times, is Plan B, The Defamation of Strickland Banks. And that's just a story about a guy having... So, do you know the Told You So? It was really popular.
Each song tells us part of the story, right?
Yeah, it was like there's a few songs which are really popular, and then it's just a great story that he tells, and it's good music as well. And it's a guy either singing rap or falsetto singing. It's like either or. It's either like really nice singing or like aggressive rap. There's no in between. I like it.
I killed a man, but I didn't really do it. It was someone else. Oh yeah.
That's exactly it. That's actually it.
Yeah. That's the whole album. I know. I've heard it many times.
Great album.
Yeah, it is.
Beautiful.
Well, I went down because you asked if lyrics or music first. I don't know if this was an offhand question at the end of the whole episode, or that was something you wanted us to research.
It was something that I did want to bring up. It's something I always thought was quite interesting.
Okay, because I found some stuff, and it was generally that, like, it was when people write music, do they write the lyrics first or the music first? And it's obviously down to the artist, and they choose. Basically, this person wrote down in their blog, you either write poetry set to music, or you produce music and add words over the top.
I like that.
So, like, it's up to you how you do it. But I quite like the idea of the poetry set to music thing. That made it quite good in my head. I like that, especially when you listen to Trash and you're like, the lyrics are crap and the music's not great either. Yeah. What even came first?
I feel like Radio 1 past 9 o'clock. I can't usually listen to it. I just don't know what's going on. It's just like noise.
I agree.
And then just Radio 4. That's my sweet spot. Listen to the...
Not much music on Radio 4.
It's just talking, and it's like the boating weather report, and it's just gibberish. It's like, and 10 to then the 4, and in the east they'll be 6 and 2. I was like, I don't even know. I'm driving in my car and I don't know what's going on. Someone's just saying words and letters. Nobody knows, and it's just so bizarre.
Yeah.
OMC, how bizarre. Great tune.
But yeah, the thing I noticed with that a little bit when I saw people before, friends of mine who are like musically inclined often tend to go for the music over the lyrics. So maybe the lyrics are more accessible, I guess, potentially. The non-musical folk, myself included. But yeah, that was about it. I mean, yeah. Anything else we want to add before we wrap this episode up?
I really like the song. I like that. It was good.
You did? Oh, cool.
Chill.
It was Community Centre by Passenger. I don't think we've said that in this half the episode, but yeah.
Is that
Community Centre
album
by Passenger, great song.
Divers
and Submarines. Yeah. I think it makes a lot of his other songs make sense when he talks about his drinking and stuff. But yeah, tortured artists vibes and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think
it's actually a decade old.
Yeah, I always like it when you go on Spotify and it's like, oh, I'll just try to find the album, and it's like, oh, there's so much more before I get to it. Like, this is old.
Impressive. Okay, guys, so yeah, thank you very much for listening. This has been No Idea Yet. I think we'll have some more of an idea, perhaps, than we did before. So there you go. What more can you ask for? We'll see you next time on No Idea Yet. Thank you very much for listening. This has been No Idea Yet. If you've enjoyed the show, you can give us a follow on Instagram. It's at No Idea Yet Podcast. Or if you've got any suggestions or ideas for us in the future, you can send us an email at noideayetpodcast@gmail.com. We'll be publishing these every Saturday, so we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.